Yo, what's going on people? Welcome back to another video. I'm not doing too great actually. Recently I went out skating, tried to do a trick and just like rolled my ankle somehow. It was like the easiest trick as well. But it's all good, I can still crack on with some gems for you guys, which is the main point. But yeah, today I thought I'd dive into some EQing mistakes and tips that will help you guys improve your mixes dramatically. So I've pulled up a beat that I made yesterday. I haven't really mixed it yet, so I thought I'd just dive into some of the things that I used to personally do that was just a time waster. Some of them are mistakes that I used to do that I'm gonna highlight and hopefully you guys can learn from yourself. Some of them are tips, some of them are things that I do now to make my beats sound nice and clean. So yeah, I'm just gonna dive into all of them in this video. Before we do actually get into this though, I've got two little quick plugs. So first one is that the Odyssey kit is out. It's a sample library, the first installment of several where I pulled together 14 really vibey loops that I made myself, along with some specialized musicians, session musicians, and they're just super vibey. So links down below if you want to jump on that. Secondly, next Thursday I'm going on a little trip down to Leeds to meet up with a few other guys, and that's as far as I'm going to go with that at this point. But yeah, some big things to come and some big things that are already going on. But yeah, enough talking, let's get into this one. Alright man, let's do this. Alright, so I've got this beat right here. I actually just pulled this sample from YouTube, just found like a nice Wheezy pack and just thrown my own drums over it. So yeah, this is what that beat sounds like.
LLB.
Really nice, man. I was kind of happy with this beat. This is one of those beats where you just find a really vibey loop and the drums just fit really well and just the mix turned out really clean. So yeah, I thought this would be a good beat to use as an example for some of these EQing tips and tricks that I... Hang on a minute. So much noise today. Alright, so as I was saying, this will be a good example to show you guys some of these tips, tricks, mistakes, and stuff. So yeah, the first mistake that I'd see a lot of guys making, and that I used to make as well, is that you shouldn't EQ in solo. Okay, some guys say you should, some guys say you shouldn't. But in the context of a beat maker that makes trap beats, when you're mixing your beats, you don't need to mix in solo. The reason why is that you don't have any context with how that particular sound that you're manipulating sounds within the mix, you know, in context with the rest of the mix. So let me give you an example. So let's say, for example, I wanted this hi-hat to be a little bit more top-endy or just a little bit more sharp. If I go ahead and solo this, and I go ahead and add an EQ to it, so let's just add a parametric EQ. Okay, I want to add some top-end to it. Let's just say I was happy with that. And then if I wanted to go and do something with the clap as well, so solo the clap, I just go ahead and add EQ to that. I wanted to give it some more low-end, some more high-end. Like that. Okay, that's kind of cool. And then I go ahead and do that with some other sounds. So let's say like this perk. So I add an EQ to that. Some top end. Okay, so I just go and add all these like bits of manipulation to all these sounds in solo. When I then go ahead and play the beat back together with everything. Okay, now the hi-hat's too loud, now the clap's not hitting how I want it to, and that perk's way too loud as well. So it's way better to EQ with everything playing at the same time, or with the majority of the beat playing at the same time. That way you can hear how that particular sound is sounding in context with the rest of the beat, and that's exactly what you want. So instead of doing that, let's just go ahead and get rid of these EQs. So let's go back to the hi-hat. Let's add an EQ. Let's say I wanted a bit more high end to it. Low end. Okay, that's much better. Okay, I've added real subtle adjustments to these sounds, and I know how this sounds when it's in context with the rest of the beat, so I don't really have to kind of solo it, go and listen to everything, solo it. Just do it with everything playing, and you kind of cut out all that middle work. So that's the first tip that I'd give you guys. It takes more time, and it's more difficult to gauge how all of those sounds are going to sound as a finished product, so don't EQ in solo. The next mistake that I see a lot of producers making, and I used to do this in every beat, and it took me so long to mix beats because of it, and that was just adding an EQ to everything, and EQing without a purpose. So basically when I was making beats before, back in the early days, I used to add an EQ to every single sound in the mix to get the mix prepared, and then I'd go into every single sound and just manipulate them even if they didn't need manipulating. Like if the sound was clean, I'd just go in anyway and add things to it because I thought that would make my beats stand out from the rest and sound unique. That's not where the uniqueness comes in your beats. The uniqueness comes from your sound selection, how you make your beats, and the whole mix inside of it and EQ inside of it just allows you to enhance or clean up certain sounds. So let me just give you an example of when you'd need to use an EQ. So if you're using an EQ on the melody, or if you think you need to use an EQ on the melody, it'd be for a few reasons. The first reason would be just to clean it up. So if you've got a finished melody like this one, so if you have your finished melody and you can hear that it's got like a lot of low end, it sounds really full, which is not a bad thing. But if it's sounding really full and you take a look at what the spectrum looks like when you play it, okay, and let's say for example you've got a lot of low end over here and it's just really, really filling out the spectrum, then what you want to do, especially if you're adding 808s and you're adding kicks and just like a heavy bass to your beats, is you want to clean that up a little bit. So the quickest way to do that is just add a parametric EQ, come to the presets, and then just come to this 20 Hertz to 18K Hertz, or the next one is exactly the same, 30 Hertz. And all you're going to do is just clean up the low end. Okay, and it's literally as simple as that. You might want to clean up the top end as well to have like your hi-hats and the vocals, when people add vocals to it, to have them stand out a bit more. So you might just want to take out some of the top end, and that's literally all you'd need to do, because when you bring everything back in, you bring your 808 back in, it's nice and clean, man. It's nice and clean, and that's exactly what you want. It's about working smarter and not harder. You don't need to do a whole ton of things to manipulate the melody in order to make it sit in a nice pocket. 9 times out of 10, you've just got to clean it up. Now, another reason to EQ with purpose for the melody specifically is just to get rid of some harsh frequencies. So sometimes when you finished up with the melody, you will have some like really sharp frequencies that kind of cut through the mix a little bit too harshly. And this part kind of ties into the next tip, which I'm going to give you in a second, but you should be able to hear this. If you're listening to a melody and you can hear that there's some like nasty sound to it that kind of hurts your ears a little bit, then that's the sign to go ahead and do this. So all you need to do is add your EQ, and you're just going to come to one of the points, so number 6 in this example, and just yank it right up. Just pull it right up like this. If you just use the scroll wheel on your mouse, it'll tighten up the bell curve. So you want to have it nice and tight, just so we can really get in specific and find that frequency that's hitting too harsh. Now this melody is kind of clean, but I'm just going to give you an example of what it would sound like. So pull it up, play the melody, and then you're just going to cycle down this EQ to find those harsh frequencies, and you will be able to hear them because it'll just kind of tingle your eardrums a little bit. Okay, so this loop's actually been pretty well mixed, but if I was to take out anything, there's a bit of a harsh frequency right there. Right there. Okay, so in that case, once you've found that harsh frequency, leave that bell right there, because that's specifically where you want to make a cut. Come over to the right hand side here and just pull it down. Just pull it down ever so slightly like that. And you want to make sure that it's kind of a sharp cut, because we don't want to just take out a whole bunch of frequencies. We just want to take out that specific frequency range. So pull it down and play it while you're listening to it, just so you can hear it. Okay, that sounds better. And then you just want to tighten it up a little bit so we're not taking out too much of that. Okay, and that's it. So that's all you'd want to do for your melody. Now, in terms of EQing with a purpose for your drums, honestly, you don't really have to. If you've got some good drums and if you've leveled it properly, you don't really have to do this. You might have some sounds that are like, have got like a bit of a thumpy low end to it, and you'd maybe want to take that out. So in that case, let's say the snare had some low end frequencies that we didn't like. We could literally just do that same cut that we did to the melody, like that, and just take out the low end. But honestly, because a lot of the percussion is basically transients, they're just really short, snappy sounds. They're not going to muddy up the mix that much. Seriously, I don't EQ my sounds in the drums at all. On the odd occasion I will, and that's just to make a specific sound sit more in the background. In that case, you already want to make that decision whilst you're adding that sound. Put it into the mixer, add your EQ, and then just make a cut, take out some of the top end. Make it sit in the background, take out some of that high end, cut some of the lows. But that's the only time that I do that. So yeah, make sure that when you are EQing your beats, that you are EQing with a purpose. If you can hear a sound that doesn't sound quite right, but you want to keep that sound in the beat, then that's the perfect time just to go in and add a quick EQ, add some slight adjustments to it. Okay, now the third tip that I'd give you guys is to EQ using your ears, not your eyes. Now, I know I said a lot in the beginning, especially when you're mixing your loop, that if you want to clean it up, to add a parametric EQ and take a look at how much space it's taking up. But in order to make the right EQing decisions, you need to hear this stuff first. It takes a little bit of time, but it really does come down just to using common sense. Now, a good example for me to show you would be if you're using some sound effects and like some atmospheric sounds in your beat. So for example, in this beat, I've used this reverse talking looking like sound effect. Let me just solo it. Okay, it's just like a trippy sort of atmospheric sound effect that I wanted to put in. But I knew that as soon as I added this sound, I needed to make some adjustments to it because it was too straight down the middle. It was too loud in the mix. So without any of the effects, this is what it sounded like. See what I mean? It's kind of like too down the middle and it's too sort of in the way of stuff. So as soon as I added this, I already knew that it sounded way too harsh. So I put it into the mixer. I added one EQ and just cut it to a pocket that I was happy with. So took out a bunch of the low end, a bunch of the high end, added another EQ and just softened up that sound even more. Just made a slight cut around here, around the high mids. Okay, and then I added some reverb and that's just like another effect. Okay, so before all the effects with the melody. Okay, and then after with the effects on. Okay, it makes a big difference, and that was a really sort of harsh example of using your ears to make EQing decisions. The best way that I found to look at it is, as you're making a beat, just ask yourself, when you add each sound, does it need to be cleaned up? Does it need to be enhanced, or does it need to be softened up in any way? If the answer is yes, then go ahead and do that as you're making the beat. I wouldn't wait to the end. I'd just do that. I'd just make that part of your workflow of making the beat. And it's just a habit thing, really. Once you've got the habit, then you're good to go. Okay, now the last thing, and this is more of a gem than anything, and I don't see a whole lot of people do this with their mix, but I've seriously started doing it, and it just makes the whole beat sound much clearer and just gives it a whole lot more clarity. And that is, just add some top end to the master. So a lot of you guys know the clipper source. You take the limiter off the master, replace it with a soft clipper. I've got the T-Rex clipper right here. But before you do that, just add a EQ. I've got the Pro EQ right here. You can use the parametric EQ, it doesn't matter. But just bang an EQ on the master and then bump the highs up. I've bumped it up around 6,000 hertz, okay? And that's just saved as a template. Every time I open up a fresh FL Studio project, that's already preloaded in there. And yeah, I don't know, but for me, adding this EQ with the high end boosted before the clipper, that's very important, because if you put it afterwards, then you're gonna end up going above 0 dB. But adding it before just cleans up the beat. I don't know, it just makes it sound nice and crisp and just gives it much more presence. So let me just show you before and after. So this is with the EQ off. Okay, it sounds decent, sounds good, but then as soon as you turn it on, it just sounds clean, man. A lot of you guys can probably rinse me in the comments saying that I'm doing this completely wrong, but I've been doing this for the past 5 or 6 months and it works. Seriously, it just works. So yeah, that'll be probably one of my biggest gems for this whole video and any mixing kind of tutorial. Yeah, that's literally all I do. That's my whole thought process when it comes to EQing. First of all, when I'm making a beat, every time I add a new sound, I ask myself, does this sound need adjusting? Does it need manipulating? Does it need enhancing? If the answer is yes, go ahead and do that straight away. Don't wait till the end. If the answer is no, just carry on and keep asking yourself that question every time you add a new beat. Another big gem if you're making trap beats is just to add that high end to the master. Trust me, it cleans up the mix. Make sure you're EQing with a purpose. Don't just add EQs for no reason. Make sure you're using your ears first. That's a really big thing. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was a little bit more of a tippy kind of video. But yeah, if there's any gems that you use with your EQs, make sure you drop them down in the comments. Share that source with all of us other guys. And yeah, make sure you leave a like, subscribe. All that stuff helps the channel a whole lot. I'll see you guys in the next one.